Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing podcast with your host, John Cass. Together, we'll take a closer look at the ins and outs of marketing through an agile lens. You'll learn from interviews with top agile thought leaders and practitioners and gain fresh new insights for your journey. Let's get ready to dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing podcast. I'm your host, John Cass, here in Boston, Massachusetts. Today, I'll be interviewing Jonathan Wasserman, a former director of sales and marketing and pharma marketing expert who has a range of experiences across several industries, including pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, animal health, and software. In addition to marketing and sales roles at several pharmaceutical companies, including Pharmascience, Ivax, Alcon, Zoetis, and Pfizer. Jonathan held roles in senior management at Oceanwide and Descartes in the software industry and served as a general manager of RSCG, a pharmaceutical advertising agency in Montreal, Canada. Jonathan holds a Bachelor of Arts Science in Life Science and a Master of Business Administration from Queen's University. He believes strongly in continuous learning and graduated in 2024 with a Master of Science degree at the University of Hull in the UK in digital transformation. Welcome, Jonathan. Thanks for joining the deep dive into Agile Marketing once again.
Really happy to be here, John. It'll be a great conversation.
Well, thank you. In the last 2 years, it feels like Gen AI didn't just knock at the door of digital transformation, it blew it wide open. For someone with your background in transformation strategy, how do you see this moment? Is AI just another tool in the tech stack, or is it forcing us to fundamentally rethink how marketing operates, especially when you're trying to stay agile?
Sure. Well, when you lead with digital transformation, a lot of it is this vision you have of what you could be or the possibilities beyond where you're at. And that sometimes comes by auditing all sorts of different tools like AI or other tools that might be available to you. I think AI, though, is a bit past adding these tools as sort of a plugin. It's a bit of a forcing function. And what I mean by that is it's a catalyst for change that is unavoidable. And what that's done is perhaps put a challenge on digital transformation from the typical design thinking or system thinking mentality where you go to the root management and look at what's going wrong and what could be improved and then search for your tools. Most companies are looking at AI and saying, I know this has great capability. How do I merge it into my organization? I think in the case of agile marketing, there were so many areas, particularly in healthcare, biotech, and even in software, I found where the embracing of agile marketing is a piecemeal effort where they adopt a few elements, but either the labor, the expertise, or even the resources of people made it really hard to fully embrace agile and get the full benefit from it. I think where AI allows for this dramatic change is now some of the limitations are eliminated quite quickly. Everything from having access to people that you don't usually have in the room by making custom LLMs or custom GPTs to content evaluation to mapping out your complete customer cycle. What have you seen, John, from your perspective in terms of how dramatic this transformation has been?
Well, I think for me, I go back to being a manager with marketing teams where I see the struggle that marketing teams have to do the work that they need to do. And so I think the biggest transformation is that AI gives marketing teams the ability to get some of that work done. I mean, so doing research, if you're a writer, for example, I've certainly been in a situation where I've managed teams of writers and they've had a lot of different tasks to do, and they'll definitely go down the list and they'll work extra hours. But part of the process of writing is doing the research, especially, say, if you're at an agency and you've got myriad customers and those customers have got different topics that you don't know about. So you have to do a lot of research, and also you have to become an expert. What do you talk about? You can do the research, but do you always know what's relevant and what's not relevant? And so the ability to use AI to do research not only cuts down the time, but it also enables writers to become better experts. So to me, AI's biggest value to marketing teams is to enable them to do the work that they need to do.
Yeah, that's really a good point. And I guess it's this searching for, were they not doing it? Were they doing it thinly? Or were certain aspects of the agility or frequency of modeling, Scrum evaluation, testing markets, evaluating insight happening at the level that perhaps now can happen with AI, making it more continuous as opposed to episodic? And I think that might be part of the transformation as well.
I totally agree, Jonathan. I mean, I think what I'm really excited about is the opportunity to work on things like personas and customer journey mapping, which marketers do, and they've definitely embraced as an approach. But I sometimes feel, and this is looking at small companies and large companies, sometimes what I see happening is that people will refer to it, but they won't be continuous and they're not always learning. And so I think there's a good reason for that, which is that marketing teams again are stretched and they don't always have time to go back and work on it. Whereas I think now not only will those tools enable them to do it, but I almost see with the way in which the technology works, where you have to build prompts and you have to use it in a certain way. It's I'm not saying forcing, but it's the workflow becomes that you go back and you use those tools.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I also think that, in a regulatory industry or highly regulated industry like healthcare, often there are certain members of the teams that have to be present for scrums, whether they're regulatory or legal. And unfortunately, the pyramid, this wasn't designed. This is not an industry designed this way. And so the struggle is often the rate limiting step of having really powerful meetings where decisions can be made is those resources aren't available. So looking forward to how this could change things is if meetings are held only quarterly because you can only get regulatory and legal in the room for so many different brand teams at that frequency, perhaps, as I say, creating personas that are actually internal regulatory devices in LLMs, uploading documentation, past examples, and handling in Pareto's idea, 80% of what you need to get done in a much more, fluid, present moment, as opposed to delaying, stretching out, and possibly avoiding meetings because you don't have the right participants. So AI can actually bring people in the room who aren't there or ideas, and that could be customer, like you're suggesting. It could also be internal people who, frankly, are just not that many in resource to solve for the problem of coming to a solution that's acceptable to the tone and consideration of the organization's ethics. So it's kind of an interesting aspect of it.
I love that idea of a colleague avatar. That's a great concept, Jonathan. Let's go to our sponsor.
Are you tired of juggling multiple software tools to manage your agency? Say hello to Deltek Workbook, the ultimate solution for marketing and communication agencies. With Workbook, you can streamline your projects, resources, and finances all in one place. Imagine real-time dashboards and reports giving you full visibility into your projects, people, and financials. Plan your team's capacity weeks in advance to avoid bottlenecks while staying on budget to maximize project margins. Plus, Workbook works perfectly for both agencies and in-house marketing teams looking to boost efficiency and profitability. And here's the best part. At PCI, we're a certified Deltek partner and reseller offering expert implementation, integrations, and ongoing support to ensure your success. Want to see how Deltek Workbook can transform your operations? For a free consultation, visit pci.us/podcast today. That's pci.us/podcast.
We've all heard about AI helping with content creation, but what about content cleanup? I'm starting to notice more AI-powered audit tools quietly emerging, and they don't seem to get much airtime beyond just producing faster content. What parts of the marketing process are still flying under the radar, where AI could really boost our agility and impact?
Yeah, I've also seen a lot more data wrangling and initial analysis. I liken it a little bit to a compass with a needle, and maybe AI can come to the conclusions that you need to run your business, but maybe it's pointing you ever continuously in the right direction. So on a hot, cold basis that you're sort of going away from the insights or the sentiments of your data into something that seems to be striking a large portion or maybe an untapped need. So I like that a lot about sort of where things are going, but there's a lot more to it than that. And I'd say insight mapping in general has emerged as a tremendously large component of AI in healthcare. Companies like Komodo Health, where they literally map out a journey that a customer has taken, what sort of worked well, what's not, merging that data in with prescription data, where you can actually see the offset. And that's a part of marketing that's often not talked about, which is, event, space, impact. When we look at correlation, we're usually looking at a one-to-one, and you can map things really clearly, like when you look at forecast data, each month of the year, each forecast date, oh, great, I can do a forecast. With marketing tactics and the ROI we're looking for, we often have to allow for an offset of time for the impact of our events to actually take place and allow for multiple events to have occurred and try to isolate to see what had the positive impact. AI is so well positioned for that, and we are not naturally good at that as marketers. So as long as we take a sort of Six Sigma view of putting these KPIs of what will success look like for us early, define that for AI, and then have it look at the data as it comes through, it can point us in the right direction, something we've never been able to do before. That leads you in an agile process to then solve for those ways of communicating along that pattern. And then you can even use, as I said, AI as a backstop to make sure that the tone and the appropriateness of what you're putting is consistent with your brand, because it can check that based on custom GPTs you have and past materials you've generated.
Do you think that Agile is helping people to adopt these tools in testing them out? Because we're getting this proliferation of tools at the moment. We've got ChatGPT, we've got Perplexity, we've got Claude. And how do you think marketers should approach? It was interesting when you were talking about this. I suddenly came up with this question, which is how there's the problem of a lot of different AI tools. So how should we be using Agile to address that problem?
That's a good point and a good question. I mean, I think that, as I said at the beginning, this sort of force function means we know we have to use it, and we find ourselves almost trying to slip it in somewhere, hoping it's going to solve for something. And it's very tempting to do that because you don't want to fall behind. But I think the best way is to go to first principles and say, like Agile looks for the untapped need or the pattern or what's working versus not, or test A/B testing where we're comparing two potential paths early as a beta test before we, spend our big money. I think the same thing is true here. So I think small project teams with very defined outcomes that have KPIs on them can evaluate the ability to bring a tool in. Will it integrate well with your systems? That's one of the largest channel problems within large enterprises, the integration of data and the adoption of data. There's a little bit of the security aspect. So certain applications are better at putting bookends on how data will be used and training models. Some companies, healthcare as one, doesn't feel comfortable with that, so they tend to build their own LLMs. I think right now we should look at it as two functions. If you have an issue and you've gone through the design thinking approach and you've identified it and now you're looking for different ways to solve for it, I think then an audit of some of the tools that are out there using the case-based method of looking at what examples were done, what were the risks, what were the outcomes desired, I think you almost have to do an evaluation of that at that point. The worst possible thing we could do is what we've always done with new programs or new ERP systems is be taken in by the awe of the potential of one use case and then try to shoehorn it into our organization, hoping it's going to solve for things we haven't even yet identified. So Agile is a great way of knowing your customer, knowing their journey, knowing how the organization can fulfill it, and testing it. I think starting off with those unmet needs and what would AI allow us to do better, more efficient, and more broadly, that's a great way to go. And there are tremendous examples in biopharma of how it's happened to improve the speed at which drugs are developed, actually. And again, it's not that the AI is telling them, oh, just combine these molecules or these proteins. What it's doing is it looks at if your goal or your challenge is an adherence or a penetration of a cell wall or some kind of attachment, here are all the things that will not work. It eliminates the things that probably will not work, allowing you to focus your efforts. And I think AI could be good at that too. So rather than being overwhelmed by the data we take in, simplify to look for patterns and sentiment with AI, then focus on that with Agile, solve for those, as opposed to spending so much time and so much resources too widely in our customer base.
Jonathan, you can't get more agile than that, which is to focus on more the important work or the work that can get done. So I'm with you there. Let's go to our sponsor.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe.
On the question of tools or technology, one idea that I didn't see enough of was AI content audit tools. Go into the background. I'm starting to see such tools now. What areas of marketing have we not embraced that you can now?
Well, I think certainly live journey maps is something like it. I find it all very interesting because we've moved so close. We've come to omni-channel marketing, which serves up information and interacts with people and technology as the customer needs it. Let's put it like that. And we hope that we've given enough options that they can serve themselves like a limited buffet at a decent hotel. The problem is that, like a hotel with a limited buffet, when the bacon's gone, it's gone for a while. And the reason for that is they can't rapidly enough provide, based on the inputs of what's in front of them, to go back to the kitchen, make enough, and keep it all that, right? So that's kind of what's happening with marketing as well, is we take a guess based on our best instincts, we put out some materials, and either because of the long time to approve those materials, the cost to generate them, or our ability to rapidly look at the insight and use profile, we're not being agile in its literal sense enough to say, oh boy, we need more emphasis here in real time. So our ability to generate content much more quickly in the tone that we're allowed, ethically delivered the way we are, our ability to interpret the data as customers are going through it and rapidly making new channels and new pathways through it is something we could never have envisioned even 3 years ago, never mind the last 18 months. And the reason for that is we were just trying to find a way to understand the path. Now we understand the path, but we have to move with it. And that's where AI can really be a game changer.
I think that point about understanding the path is really important, especially in a time when AI is not only helping marketers, but it's helping the customer and the consumers that are out there, right? So they're starting to see tools, and companies or competitors are coming along, are providing them with tools to help out. I think of that oft discussed point, the vendor relationship management tools, which would be AI agents today. So I think your point about doing the ability to do research on the fly is really important. And I am starting to see tools. I mean, I remember so many times attempting to do content audits where either the customer wasn't willing to do it because they didn't want to put the expense, and also it takes an awful lot of time on a manual basis, or immediately falling back and saying, "Oh, we've got to do sampling here because we can't look at all 10,000 pages. It's just not possible." But I do see that there's an opportunity with AI, and tools are starting to emerge, I think, that allow companies to do comprehensive content audits, right? And that is going to really change things. And then on the back end of things, we could use those same tools to, you get the insights, you get the strategy, you get the tactics, and you start implementing it. But then you start using those same tools to go back and monitor whether what you're actually doing is actually having an effect and you're actually sticking to it. So that I think AI is going to help on the front end, but it's also going to help on the back end. And that can only help marketers to focus both at the beginning stages, but also at the end of the process, post content audit and implementation, understanding that they're doing the right work.
It's funny. It's a bit of a Pandora's box, actually, in certain industries. And you've, as you always do, John, you looked at the glass half full of the potential of where it can go, right?
Yeah.
There are certain industries like healthcare where we collect so much information over time, and we have certain obligations to report information like adverse events or issues that come along the way. And our own due diligence to make sure we're doing that correctly has to happen. But sometimes the fear of looking back at the data to see, oh my gosh, did we not report on something or we did not do something well, creates a fear to even look at data in the past. So I'd say it comes with a word of caution that we need to have the hygiene on how we handle data in general. In Canada, PIPEDA has very clear guidelines, European guidelines, US guidelines. I think we have to make sure we have the hygiene on how we're going to handle data, make sure we audit how we're collecting it. And once we get to that point, then I think we can open the door to that optimism and say, okay, good. We know we've collected it, we're maintaining it a certain way, anonymizing it a certain way. Now we can do the good work of how we can leverage it to improve our customers' outcomes. But I do think that's come with a bit of an awareness that we didn't have is, oh boy, do we have things in our data we don't want to see? And that's a reality, unfortunately, in some industries. And the same thing's true in aviation, I know, that they have tons of data and they're almost afraid to look at it.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective and speaks to your experience and background in highly regulated industries. And but I think we have to. I mean, we see brands out there that actually have been recently tarnished in recent years, and if they had had those tools or they had that thinking, they could have, quickly they could have turned around and gone forward and headed off those alerts on their brand, surely.
Absolutely. And I think in non-regulatory industries, the door's wide open to improve. And in regulatory, as I say, as long as you have a pathway to making sure the ship is straight, or perhaps you set a line in the sand and say, from this point forward, now there are hygienes in place, we can use the data. It also gives you an opportunity to make sure you are keeping the data correctly. And I'm a bit of an advocate of that. I think that is a bit of a risk as we collect more and more data. We may not have the watch guards always in place at different companies to say, are we managing this data in a safe way? And we've seen some of the outcomes of that with breaches, which really put a lot of information in jeopardy. So it's positive, and I love AI, but we have to make sure that in our enthusiasm that we have that hygiene to take care of the data and to make sure that our processes and policies follow how we should use it.
That makes sense. Well, Jonathan, this has been a great discussion about how AI is pushing forward marketing and also how Agile is impacting teams. Is there anything else you want to leave the audience with?
Sure. I mean, I think we recognize that decision making can be made a lot more quickly with AI, but I would liken it to the law. The AI is trained on the past information. It's precedent, if you want to think in terms of the law. And just like a new judge doesn't like to make new law on their own because of the fear that perhaps they're missing an insight, I think we recognize that AI can point us in the right direction, can simplify, can cleanse, can help arrange. But we must remember that the value we bring to the table is deciding when is that moment to make new law, or in our case, that moment to take the risk, even though the past hasn't explained it. We can't rely on AI to make that decision for it. That really is our own. And hopefully it will challenge us to look at opportunities where we can apply our resources and make a transformative change with its help.
That's great. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, John. Nice talking with you.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive into Agile Marketing with John Cass. My thanks to Jonathan, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing podcast. Be sure and subscribe to our show and leave a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkis-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at technicalworkdiscourse.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.